black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know.
I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We are still at the International Bigfoot Conference here in Kennewick, Washington. And I'm sitting in the booth here with Q. How are you, man?
Doing pretty good. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. What do you think of the conference so far?
Very interesting. Some of them are the same as last year, but overall very interesting. And got some questions that I asked a couple of the guys that answered. So
yeah,
it was real interesting.
Who do you think, who is your favorite speaker?
Probably the favorite one would be Ron Moreland, just because of the questions that I asked him and then how he answered them afterwards.
Yeah,
so,
Ron Morehead.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't really get much better than Ron. But Q, you actually had an encounter. If you would, for the audience, would you kind of start from the beginning and walk us into what happened?
Sure. It took place about 22 years ago. I was hunting up in northern Wisconsin. Well, let me start that I was told not to be hunting in this area. My uncles, I have 3 uncles, and they told me, don't go up there hunting. Well, I was young, and everybody else was getting their own little hunting spots, so I wandered up there. And I was bringing deer out of there every year. Nothing, trophies or nothing like that, but putting meat in the fridge. Well, this was my senior year. I went up there, and it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was watching this squirrel and blue jay. I don't know if they were fighting. And then, as I was watching them, I heard this. It was a scream or a yell, but it reminded me of a deer injured or dying, the dying whale. But it was coming with like a huge lung capacity of... So I thought something was down. I wanted to go look. I was young, had a big gun, had a big knife. Everybody called me Rambo, so I felt pretty protected. So I started walking up this ridge. It's a big oak ridge. First of all, I'll give you the layout of the area. I was sitting probably about 150 feet up Oak Ridge, overlooking a cedar swamp. And when the scream started, they were coming from the northwest of me. So I turned around and walked up there. Now, my uncles did tell me, since I was bringing deer out of there, to stay out of this pine area. So it was hardwoods with this pine plantation in the middle. It's not a pine plantation, but a pine growth. And if I had known what they told me after, yeah, I'd have went hunted somewhere else. So
the reason why not to go up there?
Yeah, so yeah. I'll tell you that after my encounter. So I went up there, and the screams are coming from that area. I immediately turned around, just because I remembered my uncle's, warning, don't go in there. So I turned around, started heading back down to where I was hunting, where my four-wheeler was. And as I got over to the crest of the hill, I looked down towards the swamp, and there was this thing standing there. it was holding onto a branch, and it was looking at me. I know it seen me well before I did, just because I had blaze orange on, I believe. But the thing that got me was when I looked at it through my binoculars, and this was kind of strange too. I looked at it with my binoculars, and it was breathing really fast, and its cheeks were going in and out, like, you know. If you ever seen Ghost in the Darkness, have you ever seen that with Michael Douglas?
No.
There's a scene in there when I first seen Ghost in the Darkness. It scared me and brought me right back to that day. But there's a scene in there before they, when Val Kilmer meets Michael Douglas, they go hunting for this lion, and it shows the tribal people, and they're blowing with their cheeks in and out fast. And that's what this thing looked like. And it was looking right at me. But it wasn't, I didn't feel scared. I felt curious. I was like, man, what the hell is this? Who is messing with me?
Right.
And the only thing I can think of in my young mind was Shaquille O'Neal. I got to see him play down at the Bradley Center in Milwaukee one time. And before the game, you can go meet the players. Well, I didn't get to meet him, but sure ran by, and he was a big guy. And that's the only thing I can compare it to. But I knew he wasn't in northern Wisconsin in the middle of November, basketball season and all. So I started to think, what the heck could this be? Yeah. And the second thing that came to my mind was bears. Young bears will play with each other, crawl on each other's backs, and that's what I thought the second thing was. But this thing literally had an arm that was holding on to this branch. And now this is where the interesting part happened. When I took the binoculars down, I wanted to get a closer look, so I brought my rifle up. And when I did, it bolted.
Really? Wow.
Now there's a creek that was on the outside of this. It was on the outside of the cedar swamp, and it jumped it. You and I can jump it, but we would not run like it did. Right. We'd tuck and roll, yeah. And then get up and run.
Break an ankle, yeah.
Yes. And when I seen the speed that it was going, I was like, dang, this person's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So right away, I thought it was a person. I thought it was, I have a couple brothers. One's 6'6", and the other 6'5", and they're pretty big guys. Yeah. But I knew they weren't in the area because I was hunting with my uncles and my cousin. And
let me ask you, when you look through it, you're looking through the binoculars at it, how far away is it from you?
Probably about 50 to 60 yards.
Oh, okay.
It was far enough away. Now, the binoculars that I had were just cheap. Yeah. They were $5-10 from Kmart or Walmart, whatever was in our local store.
And can you describe what you saw, Q, when you were looking through there? Let's say, no one knows what Bigfoot is.
The thing that got me was the way it was breathing. It looked like it was pissed off with, but it felt like it was trying to intimidate me, which it was.
Yeah.
It really was. But the thing that really got me was the mouth. The way it was breathing at me and its eyes. Now, I couldn't really see them, but they looked like they were moving around.
Kind of twitchy?
Twitchy type thing. But as I thought about it, I was thinking maybe it was watching something running behind me. Because the original noises were coming from the northwest.
Oh, really?
And this thing was below me towards the southeast.
I guess
so. Now, this was years later, in 22 years of thinking about this. But as it took off and it ran into the swamp, and by this time it was probably about 2:45, and it's swamp dark at that time.
Yeah.
So, because it gets dark about 4:30 up in Wisconsin during that time of year. Now, I didn't feel any fear, like I said. I was
just curious. Just what is this?
Just curious and shock at first. Now, I forgot about my four-wheeler being up there. I started walking back to camp. And as I was walking into the swamp, I came to this. It's a great big cedar tree. About the size of this couch that's in front of us here. Maybe a bigger. I got to that, Wes, and that's when the fear actually hit me.
Yeah.
Even still thinking about it.
Yeah, I know.
Get those people bumps.
You go right back to the moment, don't you?
But I stopped and I looked at this tree, and I honestly thought there was something there or wanted me, or just the fear. And I yelled at it. I told him I had a gun. No, I had a 270, 200 grain.
Yeah.
So I knew it would put a hole in something.
Right.
Plus the big knife that I was carrying. But whatever was, or I don't even know if there was anything there. But my mind was scared of something.
And this is when you're going back up.
This is as I was going back to camp. So I did a big detour. I went all the way around that thing, but I never took my eyes off of that tree.
Yeah. Sorry about the clapping.
I was going to say. But I never took my eyes off that tree.
Yeah.
And I never took this is the only time I ever walked in the woods with my gun ready to fire.
Yeah.
And I caught back up to the four-wheeler trail, and when I seen our cabin, I took off running. Got inside, shut all the blinds to the thing so there was only one window open, because if this thing did follow me back, which I had a feeling it was, but it ran off in the opposite directions. That's where I'm thinking there was more of them around, or my mind was just so full of shock that you start seeing things and feeling things that you normally wouldn't.
You're on high alert at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I got in there. I was sitting in a chair with my rifle inside the cabin, loaded yet and everything. And it took about 10, 20 minutes later, and I see my cousin walking up the driveway. So I hurried up, put my gun away, sat down back in a chair. And he came in, and I wanted to see if he got anything. And first thing he said was, "What the hell are you doing?" But he used a different word.
Yeah.
"What the hell were you doing running through the woods into the swamp with
really?
no orange on?" And I was bigger than my cousin, so rightfully so, but I was like, I wasn't in the swamp. And then right there, it all came back to me, and I started crying. I told him what happened. And usually he would be messing around or anything. He goes, "You need to talk to my dad." I was like, oh. And he calmed me down. He's like, "Well, there's nothing here." I walked in, nothing around. Woods is the same, calming me down. Asked me if I wanted something to eat. And I said no. So I waited for my uncles to come back from their hunting spot. And when they did, I met them outside in Niagara Falls, telling them I'm scared. And they told me, well, that's the reason why we never wanted you to go up there and hunt in the first place. And I looked at them, I was like, well, why didn't you guys tell me this? I would have never went. I would have went and found me another area.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so they reassured me, as long as you didn't do nothing, they should be okay. Everything's fine. But I was scared. I didn't want to go back in the woods. I left that night. I broke camp, and I never went back into the woods for 2 years. And it took a friend of mine to actually pay me to get in. He was at work, and he's like, "Take me up to the spot," because I told him about it. He was a good friend of mine. And I was like, "No, I'll tell you where it's at. You can go up there." And I was strapped for cash at the time, and he goes, "Well, I'll take you up there. We'll go a double date, and I'll give you an extra couple Ben Franklins." I was like, "All right, we'll go up there, but we're taking guns."
Yeah.
And if there's any time I feel uncomfortable, I'm gone. He goes, "All right, fine." So we went up there and looking around. Now, nothing happened. Woods was the woods. Nothing around. Showed him where the thing was standing. The tree was still standing. The creek was still going through. Now, if you go up there, it's a dry creek bed. But when we were there, coyotes started screaming. And talk about that fear coming
that
back to you.
Pops right back, yeah.
It's like hearing fireworks for a vet. You know what I mean?
PTSD, yeah, absolutely.
It came back to me, and I told him.
Perfect reference, too.
And I told him, I was like, "We got to go." And he's like, "Those are coyotes. And they sound like they're a couple miles away." I was like, "Let's go. We got to go." So we did. he went back up there a couple times afterwards, and because he was interested in it back then than I was. So, but just to tell you about what my uncles had happen to them. So they used to go up there and camp inside of that pine growth, and up there's some springs, and there was a creek that had trout in it, and that's where they'd go up there and spend their summers. They
And I apologize to you, Q. I know the conference is wrapping up, so everyone's clapping. So for the audience, I think this is the last one. The last hurrah.
This is real live action.
Yeah, this is live action right here, Q.
But
we didn't let him finish clapping.
Yeah, better. I'm gonna take a drink of Coke.
Yeah, man. Tear it up. It's like the audience is right here with us, man.
That's right.
But so Q, so what did so they used to go up there and fish?
They used to go up there, and that's where their little summer retreat was. They'd go for at a two week time, and their dad, my grandfather, would bring them supplies if they didn't catch enough trout. Well, this one summer they were up there, and it was only at night that this happened. They started hearing things sounded like it was dropping, but it was no wind. So they figured it was somebody up there throwing rocks at them, which at the time they thought it was their dad and their uncle messing with them. But things started picking up. And it was finally, they were up there for 3 nights. This is 3 nights into a 2-week stay. And in the middle of the night, something ran through and actually kicked their fire. Ran through their camp and kicked the fire. They left the fire burning a little bit. And it kicked it, knocked it over as it continued running. And they came out, this was back in the early 70s, late 60s, where the flashlights are nothing like they are today. And they were shining around, and they could see eyes shine back to them. But it was moving back and forth, and my one uncle said it was because he thought that the light was shining directly on him, that he was using a branch or something to see what my uncle was holding, because he got the light, he could hide a gun or something. And that's where he said the swaying came from. And there was 3 of them in the woods, and they built the fire back up, stayed up till night, and the next day they packed up and left. So now that was all 3 of them together. The oldest of my uncles, he went back up there to try to do some hunting, and he was screamed out of there. Literally screams just coming at him constantly. We'll wait here.
Sorry, Q. Sorry, brother. That's Bob Giblin wrapping up there on stage. Did you get a chance to meet Bob?
I did. I got a picture with him over by the, the 8-foot wooden thing over there? Yeah.
He sure is a nice guy.
He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. So, now he got back to my oldest uncle, he actually got chased out of there by screams. Now, if you go onto the BFR website, in that area, a cop, now this was back in roughly the same time in the mid-70s, he was walking with some friends, and they were screamed at from the woods. Now, the popple slashings that are up there, they can be real thick, like walking through a jungle. But whatever it was breaking these popples, but they couldn't see it. Now, that's what the report says. So, kind of collaborates with my uncle and at that time of what was going on. And just recently, I seen that the Finding Bigfoot went up in that area. I don't know. I haven't seen the episode or anything like that, but that was huge news back home. So
yeah, I bet.
And then that's when I started poking. When I finally got my wits back and I made it back into the woods. Now everything changed from that point on. You get into the woods, it's 100%. My eyes are moving.
Yeah,
I'm listening.
It affects you. It really does affect you, doesn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
And a couple weeks ago, I went camping with my wife. And that first night, I was up. It was like a watchman, up on the hour, counting the time for when the sun was going to rise. And nothing happened. But what freaked me out in the middle of the night, though, one of my dogs growled, and then the other one barked. all within and freaked me out. But what I think it was the older one had some dreams, and then the younger one woke him up and barked at him, you know what I mean? Because they went right back to sleep. So
I wanted to ask you, when you saw the thing, would you say it looked more human-like, or would you say it looked more ape-like? Or
well, so I was looking down at it, and it was looking up at me. So it was full. At the time, I thought it was standing full upright. But when it jumped, it looked like Carl Lewis jumping over the hurdles. I mean, this thing, what I seen was fast, and it was put together for making runs and getting out of areas quick, or getting to an area quick.
Yeah.
Those are the only things that I could really tell. Like I said, I was pretty far away, and the binoculars I had were horrible.
No, I understand.
But
it's odd, isn't it, running into something like that?
And what bothered me for a long time was, one, as soon as I raised my rifle, it took off. I didn't get to look through it through the scope, which I wish I could have, because then I could have got everything I wanted to know about it. But
almost like it knew.
It did, and that's
pull that rifle up. I'm out of here.
In that area where we were hunting, and our cabin is a lot of cabins around there. It's a tourist section in the summertime. In the wintertime, there's nobody around there.
Do you ever go back, Q? Have you ever been back to that area?
Well, I took my buddy one time, and then I took a couple older friends of mine up there and just told them where it is. It's all logged up now. The swamp is still there.
Did you get the feeling like your family might have known more than what they said? I mean, there's 2 incidences they're telling you about, but... Yeah. He made a comment to you where he's like, well, you didn't shoot at it, you didn't, so you're okay, you know. And that's, unless you are in this field or unless you have had experiences, that's something a normal person wouldn't say unless they, had one encounter. It's almost like he knew, or am I reading too much into it?
No, and I thought the same thing. And I asked them all, and different times, asked them one-on-one. I'm really close to my cousin's uncle. Or my cousin's father, he's my uncle. Yeah. He basically raised me, put me into the woods and stuff. So, not but utmost respect for him. And he just said, there's some things we just don't talk about. And the other one, which would be my youngest uncle, he won't talk about it. He was there, gave me, the consoling, what an uncle should do at the time. Oh, it's okay now, we're all here. And
right. He gave the speech.
Yeah, the older one, though, he looked into it, and he, like I said, he tried to go back up there, and he was screamed out of that area. So there was probably about a 20-year wait before somebody actually went. I don't know if that's true or not, if other people went up there or not, but for our family, I was the only one within that 20-year wait where I went back up there. But I never went back beyond that on the top of the hill. So...
What do you think that these things are, Q? What's your own personal opinion? I know you listen to the show a lot, and I ask people that, and there's no wrong answer. I mean, there's no...
Well, what I seen was there's definitely human traits there. I mean, you got to be, if you're going to sit there and breathe and stand up and look, and then... what word am I looking for here? The knowledge and understand the difference between binoculars and a rifle, that puts intelligence into these.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So... the difference between what I brought up and what the second thing I brought up was totally different. And I honestly, what I look at it and I think about it all the time is it's somewhat human. Could be a hybrid. Who knows? But if it is, there aren't no guys being disappearing up in that area. There's no females, so they're obviously reproducing somewhere or migrating through. So, but during that time of the year, everybody's got a rifle on them, and they're hunting. It's at the middle of November, so not too smart to be up in that area.
Absolutely.
Messing around with local folk. So there is some intelligence that I picked up from my side, and
almost like it knew what that meant the moment you raised that rifle up. It knew what was going to happen next.
Exactly, and I thought about this. So those ones that were behind me. Maybe it did what it was supposed to do, and that was to draw me over there. Like I said, it sounded like a wounded deer. And as a hunter, you want to go find that wounded deer and put it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then when I went back, and I say it was a big one, because when I reached up and tried to grab that branch, the branch was at 8 foot. And it was a little bit below that, his head. But his arm was no reach than what I am right now, just grabbing hold of it. It was, but I think when I looked in at what I could see with my little binoculars and its eyes were twitching, I think that it was watching those other ones around, if there was something there.
And you could be right, but I've had people on that have seen that before. And they'll say it kind of moved around like you've heard crackhead, in different ways that people, the way they describe it. But I've heard people talk about the twitchy eyes, and the kind of jerky motions, like it's unsure of what you're going to do.
Well, he was just straight, like a tree.
Yeah.
But its eyes were dancing, and then its cheeks were actually blowing the air out. But then when I walked through there and I felt that fear, that's the only main, if I was looking for an answer, is what the heck was around that tree? The hell was around that tree or why did I react like that? Because like I said, I didn't have no fear when I first seen it. It was just like, what?
What did they say? There's I'm going to put my foot in my mouth, but there's a saying where our brain's only able to process like 10% of what we see, smell, touch, but there's a lot more going on, but our brain is in the background is actually processing those things. And I've always wondered if that's when you get into those moments of like that, not necessarily like Sixth Sense, but kind of like Sixth Sense, to where it's like you're getting warned, don't go here, don't go by this tree, or focus on this tree. Because I've had other witnesses on. There was a guy I had on a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about they were hearing noises, and he stopped and he focused in on this tree. And all the guys got up and said, what are you looking at? And he said, I'm not sure yet. And he's focusing on this tree. Well, come behind that tree, one of these creatures pops out and looks at him. And he hadn't seen that before. But he stood up and literally focused right in on that tree. And I find that amazing, the way our brain works. It might have been something like that.
It could have been. I was just, it could have been the adrenaline. I ain't gonna lie, my heart was beating. And maybe it calmed down. And then my body's like, hey, bro, run. Or you need to get out of here. And that's where I focused in on. But there could have been easily a huge bear. Could have been a couple people standing behind that tree. That's how big that cedar tree was. Nothing like out here in the Pacific Northwest, but it was a big tree. And you could easily have ran around that. You could play merry-go-round that and not even see the guy on the other side of you. Now, through the 22 years that I've asked a lot of people, even in my profession, I ask a lot of people, hey, have you, I'm not afraid to ask them. And then that's where I'm able to sit down with you and talk, because I'm not a person that likes to talk about this over the phone. Because I could be reading these guys and they roll their eyes at me, then I just end it. But when I sit there and talk to them and they can see, and I can see them that they're really interested in and wanting to hear about it or learn, maybe there's something that I noticed that somebody else could bring up and help somebody else down the road. And that's where I talked to Ron about last night. I told him a little bit about what my experience was, and he said it could have been the zaps or whatever these things can do to you, where it put the fear into you over that tree. And I found that real interesting in us.
Yeah, it could be. It's hard to say. It's a terrifying encounter, though, man. It really is kind of especially when you're not expecting it. And it's funny how family, I liken your family a lot like mine. They would have done the same thing. They would have been like, hey, don't go in this area, and not explain why. Well, what's the first thing you're going to do? Especially when you're 18 years old. You're going to go to that area. And for them it's an amazing account, man. I'm glad you made it out okay. It sounds like they were doing something else, the Sasquatch, and you kind of stumbled into it.
I still think about it, I'm like...
But they're doing like a wounded predator call, or a wounded prey call almost,
And I knew, and I kind of picked up what it was, but it was like you hearing a barn owl.
Yeah.
But it's a 400-pound barn owl.
Right. Yeah.
It was something of a hurt deer or hurt animal, but yet it wasn't. That's where I was like, I need to go see what this is. First
like
of all,
it sounded off a little bit.
Yeah, and I was thinking, well, maybe it was a big buck, and I can bring that into camp. But
It was.
It ran me out of there. So, but yeah, thanks for and coming here last year was the first time that I actually sat down and told a couple people I met, just some of the patrons that came in here and shared, and they seem somewhat the same way I was. Yeah. They will tell it. I have no problem telling it if you ask me.
Yeah.
But if I start seeing anything of looking away, got to check Facebook or something like that, I'll end it. And that's the same thing they were saying too, was we just end it. Yeah. And then you can laugh at me and do whatever you want. Yeah.
No, I'm not going to laugh at you. I'm humbled that you'd come over, man, and share it. I was telling Woody all day today, we were going through it. I was like, we got to grab Q, man. We got to grab him. I want to interview him. So
yeah, well,
I'm honored that you'd come on.
And it's an honor for me to be here, too, to sit down and talk to you. Like I was telling Woody about, and he was like, yeah. And I was sitting there, I had goose pimples all over me.
Yeah, I saw.
And he was like, yeah, same thing. When you go through it and you think about that, and when I seen it, no goose pimples. I can talk to you about what I seen all day. Yeah. But when I get to that and I talk about that damn tree, it still gives me the still brings it back. So
yeah, it takes you back to that moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know I wouldn't have been able to outrun it by watching it jump that creek. Yeah. So and then that's another thing weird too was, so there's little bitty like the Christmas trees in the cedar swamp. Well, I call them Christmas trees, and those are roughly about 6 foot, 6.5 feet. And my cousin said that was me running through there. Well, first of all, I'm not that tall, but he said he could see the head bouncing as it was running towards the lake. We call that we have there is running towards that lake. And I had one more thing. Well, I was telling Woody, but I had one more thing that happened to me. Yeah. This is years later, before or after everything that happened. But before I moved out here, I was camping. At our land, and I was in a tent, and I was asleep, and I could hear this boom, 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 boom. I could feel it through I was laying on the ground, so it was hollow. I could hear these footsteps running, and I could hear it breathing. And it ran, and it jumped into the lake, and at that time I got out, and I looked, shined the flashlight towards the lake, and it never came back up. Whatever it was that ran through there never came back up.
Never came back to the area, or
came up after it jumped in.
Oh, really?
You could see where the lake was disturbed at night. You got the mill pond effect. Yeah. Well, there's definitely the white bubbles and such, and it never came up. And I sat there for a good 5 minutes, because then right after that, my girlfriend at the time drove over, and she drove out there. She's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I was just getting the gun out of the truck." And we went to sleep, but it didn't. I wasn't scared. I was just like, "What was that?" I shined all the way around that area. Whatever it was, went diving deep.
That's interesting. Did you hear that show he did a while back about? He's an older gentleman now, but he's talking about when he was a kid, and it was a swamp, and what happened was underneath that swamp were caverns. And in this one area of the swamp, the alligators wouldn't go, the snakes wouldn't go.
Yes.
And it was well known in that area that these things, that's where they would actually go down to those caverns. And they would swim down there. And so they went out as kids one time to prove that wrong. So he swam underneath and found the cavern. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Oh yeah, you can get up and walk around underneath there, and you get out of the water." And
there is a lot of caves there. Yeah. In that area where we were at, I'll tell you another one. So we were fishing, and we had another guy come with us. Now, I'd never seen anything, and when we were out there, nothing happened to us. But my cousin brought his friend, and his friend was straight city slicker. He went out to the store, bought his own fishing reels and all that kind of stuff. While we were fishing, he was setting up his stuff, and we were on a lake or on a river, and my cousin went downstream, I went upstream. He was in the middle of us. Set up our rigs. As I was walking by him, he was still on his first one. And we went up, built a fire, and we were sitting there waiting for him. About 5-10 minutes later, he come up, and he just was like, "I want to go home." And we're like, I was mad. I was like, "No, we're not taking you home." He said, "Please take me home. Pay you guys whatever you want. I want to go home." My cousin's asking him, what's wrong? He goes, I'll tell you once you guys take me home. We took him home. And on the way home, he said there was something sitting up in a cave watching him set up his rig right after I walked through. And it was just watching him. He said he could see the steam coming off the moon and all that. And the next day, we went and got bigger guns. We only had little pistols with us because, to scare off a bear or a pack of wolves or wild dogs.
Right.
And so we went and grabbed some shotguns. And at daybreak, when we were done fishing, we went up there, and sure enough, there was little fish bones, some little animal critter bones laying around there, but nothing definitive, which I thought it was probably a bear watching him. But I don't know, but whatever it was scared the hell out of this guy.
Wow.
But my cousin and I, we never had no problems that whole night. We went down there, set up his rigs, and tried to look up there, but I couldn't see anything at that time. It was pitch dark. But that was just interesting.
That is interesting.
It is what it is.
Yeah, there's stuff out there, and you can definitely run into it. Look at that schmuck over there. Woody giving us the stink eye. But I appreciate you coming on, Q, and sharing,
thank you,
man.
Thank you.
It was nice meeting you, too.
It was an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, the honor was mine, man.
And continue listening on.
I appreciate it, man.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll see you next year.
Definitely, if I can, or maybe even out in Utah, if I can get out there.
Absolutely.
So, but either way, I'm a local guy here. Maybe I'll bump into you.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So, okay.
Well, thank you, brother.
Thank you.
And that was Q. Woody's back here in the booth. I know everyone's wrapping up everyone's kind of wrapping up here, the International Bigfoot Conference. I felt bad when I was interviewing Q, all the clapping going on. I don't know how that'll translate to the audience, but I don't know, man. What was your favorite part of this whole thing?
And I hate to repeat myself, there were so many good things, but you know what? When it really comes down to it, you got to love Bob Gillen. 50 years, here we are. The guy is he's amazing, and he's in such great shape, and I enjoy talking to him every time I see him, and I'm just going to have to go with Bob Gillen, man. I really am.
I'm putting my shades on.
Yeah, you're trying to copy me now, aren't you?
We're sitting here like a bunch of Hollywoods.
Yeah. And you know what? And another thing, too, is, Tom Sewid. He had a really great presentation. There were so many good ones. There really was.
Yeah. I think my favorite part was meeting the fans, to be honest with you.
That was cool, too.
I think that was my favorite.
I'll tell you what the coolest part about that, I know I've kind of already said it, was when the fans are meeting other fans.
Yeah.
And to me, that kind of made it full circle, really.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're wrapping it up here at the International Bigfoot Conference 2017. We are done. I was going to give you a hard time about the valve switch.
Oh, feel free. Feel free.
I know you're a little touchy. I know it's been a long weekend for you.
I like my AC. They don't even know what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I guess we'll wrap it up with a funny story. When I was a kid, Woody's already heard this like 2 or 3 times.
Have fun with it.
My first car was a station wagon.
Right.
Pile of garbage. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think I sold it for, just above the amount of when they come pick your car up. When it doesn't run, they'll give you cash for clunkers. Well, I got $50 above that for this car. That's basically, that tells you where this car is at, right?
Oh, wow.
But it had this amazing feature. And when you got into the car, if it was cold outside, you could turn on the heat.
Correct.
And if it was hot outside, you could actually turn on the cool air.
Mm-hmm.
I was like God.
Right. Well,
I get in Woody's car, and we're coming down here to the International Bigfoot Conference.
And it's not like it's 101 degrees ripping down 84.
It's 200 degrees. And Woody's like, hey, I got to pull over. I got to, what's it called? The petcock?
The petcock?
Petcock?
Petcock valve?
The petcock valve. He's got to pull over and lift the hood, turn his valve, so we actually get cool air. Now, this was in the middle of the night.
So and it turns cool immediately, right?
No. And this was in the middle of the night. So even when it cools down at night, we got to pull back over, lift the hood, turn the valve back.
And you get one or the other. You don't get both.
Yeah, you get one or the other. It's a hell of a car, man.
You pick. You want hot or you want cold? And it's full blast. You have no fan control.
I'm just giving you crap, man.
I know.
I could have walked here.
I gotta get it fixed.
Life could always be worse.
And people actually have AC and heat at the same time.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow, I'm light years away, I guess.
Well, that's it for us tonight, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and I will be back next week. Woody, thanks for hanging out, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I had a good time.
Until next time, everyone. Have a great night.
my wheels and don't go alone. The lights on, baby, you should know that you're gone. The lights on, this is my home, place where I own memories of you, dear, until your eyes close at the sky. I'm mesmerized, memories of you, dear. I saw moon as a human and writer. The lights on, and its power grew wider. The lights on, so I put my speed a little wiser.